been given to me to address the honorable members here of the party. And a lot of issues that I intended to cover has actually been dealt very elaborately by Leo, and before that by Sundararajan. So I would like to confine myself to some of the basic points that would need to be elaborated. And I think what is very important is the point that was raised by Leo himself with regard to the issue of federal character, right? And this is a direct assault on the federal character of the Indian Constitution itself. But having said that, let me first start with the most important point, that is, first of all, it is in excess of the powers that is vested on the executive. Anyone who reads this particular notification, it doesn't read like a notification, it reads like a law, which is like a bill which is to be placed before parliament. It has definition clause, it has aims and objectives, it has different provisions, and most important is that it has a substantive penalty and other violation provisions. Now, there's nothing wrong in any notifications having any of these these details. The problem arises because of the fact that it has been done in a manner which completely undermines the power and authority of the parliament. And I think that's something which is very, very important to realize. This is an exercise of bureaucratic power at its highest. And so therefore, the 2006 notification was an exercise of bureaucratic power. And later on, when they found it difficult to amend the notification because you need public comments and all, the Ministry of Environment started this unique process of amending laws through what they call as office memorandums, OMs. It's a completely illegal process. It is an improper process. It's an irregular process. And I would say it's an unconstitutional process, because an office memorandum should at the most regulate the manner of interaction or the way the business has to be conducted within the office itself. It cannot take away the right of individuals, and it cannot take away the right of citizens. And that is what exactly has been done. Series of office memorandum were issued, and the main purpose of issuing all these office memorandum was very simple: to circumvent the process not only of parliament but also circumvent the process of seeking public input. If they had actually issued this, in order to do that, office memorandum were issued. And this notification essentially is to legitimize all the illegal office memorandum into what they call as a law. It is not a law because a delegated legislation or a notification is law only when it satisfies all the requirements of the parent legislations. This does not satisfy the requirement of the parent legislation. It actually contradicts the parent legislation. And not just the Environment Protection Act. It contradicts the Air Act. It contradicts the Water Act. Now, if I cover a few of the issues, what is very wrong in this law? I've covered the first of it, which is the fact that the executive cannot actually exercise this power because it is contrary to the provisions of the Environment Protection Act. The only power the central government has under the provisions of the Environment Protection Act is to protect the environment. Here, the Environment Minister clearly says this notification's main purpose is ease of doing business. Now, that cannot be a basis on which an environmental legislation is enacted. This itself is problematic. I have also raised an issue, and I think this is a very important one, where we have a situation where the Environment Minister also happens to be an industry minister. And therefore, it would create a conflict of interest when the issue of environment comes in, because it will be subsumed within the larger domain or the requirement of industry itself. Now, if you come to the issue of process, because I think what is also problematic is the law is a problem, the notification is a problem. But if you look at it, the process that is adopted, as Leo has rightly said, is you introduce a law for public comment within a week of the nationwide lockdown. That's one very, very problematic aspect. But even more problematic aspect is the repeated insistence of the central government that they are bound by the Official Language Act of 1963, and they will refuse to publish the notification in any language other than English and Hindi. So therefore, this is where the issue comes in. Hindi is not the national language of India. It is the official language of the Union of India, the central government. This law does not concern only the central government. It concerns every taluka, every panchayat, every place in India. I can understand if they're coming out with an amendment in the companies in English, you do it in Hindi. But if you're amending a Panchayati Raj law, or if you're amending a provision which relates to forest and environment, it is not a matter of the union. It is a matter of every single state, district, sub-district, subdivision, taluk, and panchayat. And therefore, what I find is this adamant nature, where the government says that we will publish only in Hindi, in Devanagari script, and no other language. And yesterday or day before yesterday, when Delhi High Court directed them about a month and a half back, make it available at least in all the languages. In the 8th schedule of the Indian Constitution, there are languages spoken, 8 languages, which are not recognized in Hindu, like Khasi, like Garo in Malay. But then make it available in the language that the people speak. The government of India challenges the Delhi High Court order before the Supreme Court. They get it dismissed and withdrawn to file liberty before the High Court as a review. They file a review 2 days back. And I just want to say, what are the grounds they have taken in the review petition? It is worth seeing it. They say translation is impossible. I find it amazing. You have a Union of India with all the power saying it is impossible to translate in local language, that is language recognized in the Constitution. They cite Article 343 to say the Union is only English and Hindi. And what are the grounds they say? They say, well, the meaning will be lost in translation. So if you translate it into Kannada or you translate it to Tamil, the meaning of the language, meaning of the law will change. It will create constitutional, there is no constitutional and statutory obligation to publish any law, order, notification, circular in any language that the states use. This is where. And first and all, it will lead to administrative and procedural difficulties. It is absurd that a union actually files an affidavit before a constitutional court saying we do not have the means and capacity to translate law into a language which the people can understand. And I think this notification ought to be rejected only on this ground. The second very important point that I would like to raise here is that even if we leave out the whole domain of environment for a moment and bring in the concept of rule of law, I think this is opposed to the rule of law. And I think it undermines every fundamental basis of law itself. I'll give an example here, which is there in this new notification. It says in very simple terms that what is a violation. So it says that you have violated a law, and what is a law that normally applies to every citizen. There's a violation of law, any citizen can go report about the violation and action is taken. Second option is the authorities go and find the violation and take action and take penal action against the person for violating the law. What is the punishment? The punishment is what is prescribed in the law passed by Parliament. So if it is a murder, it is the punishment prescribed in the IPC. If it is an offense under any other law, it is the offense that is punishable under the law that is passed by Parliament. But the EI notification does it differently. What it says is, first and foremost, it is for the violator to first of all come forward to the authorities and report about their violation. Now, absurd. So I would say other maybe the government has recognized we want to reduce such an extent there will be no pollution board anymore. So therefore, the violator one fine day will realize maybe out of dream or something wrong, and therefore the time now for to go and declare to the government that I violated the law and disclose about the violation. And Water Act, which are the state subject, very clearly say that if any unit operates without a consent to operate and a consent to establish, the owner and the operator in charge shall be punishable with an imprisonment which shall not be less than 1.5 years. This is what the law says passed by Parliament, the 1974 Act and the 1981. If you violate a law, you go to jail. But then the wonderful bureaucracy says that no, Parliament may have passed a law, but we say now that the punishment will be this. The violator, whenever they disclose that I violated the law, if they are category A project, they will pay 5,000 rupees per day from the day on which the violations happened till the day that they disclose the violation. They don't go to jail. There is nothing, no relation with what they produce. I'll give an example. Air pollution is a big issue, a very big issue. Every unit, coal-fired power plant, which is now established, requires to install a flue gas desulfurization, FGD. For a large power plant of about 1,500 megawatt, a FGD will cost about 1,000 crores. So if there is an industry, and if I'm running someone, what is the cost benefit analysis that the person will do? He will say, well, I'll not install an FGD and spend 1,000 crores. What I will do is, I will pay 5,000 rupees a day for the day on which violations happen, and that comes to 1.5 lakh, which comes to about how much? It comes to roughly in 10 years, it will come to 2 crores. 20 years, it will come to 4 crores. So the entire unit can operate with only an amount of 4 crores payment. And that too, where this law says that the right to report about a violation is only given to the violator. Second, it is only applicable to an authority, that is the government authority, but the citizen's right has been taken away. And I think again, on this ground itself, the law has to be struck down. The Constitution imposes a duty on every citizen under Article 51(a)(d) to protect and conserve the environment and to have compassion for every living being. If the Constitution today has given me the power as a citizen to protect the environment, who is the Ministry of Environment, which has the mandate to protect the environment, to take away that right from me as a citizen and say this right now vests with the violator? Please understand what the implication of this, if this is applicable to terrorism. Will we wait for the terrorists to come and make a voluntary disclosure about their crime, and then we put a monetary value to the crime that is committed and it is legitimized irrespective of what the criminal law will say? I don't think so that this law needs to be struck down only on environmental ground. It is an absurd law. It is an absurd law which violates every norm of a constitutional democracy. And I would say that no country, unless it's ruled by a military dictatorship, would actually pass and comment for it and seek and actually intend to pass a law. And having missed one point I would like to highlight is when they were asked, the government of India, that please show us what effort have you made to communicate this draft notification with the Pollution Control Board, the panchayats to states, to all of them. On an affidavit before the High Court of Delhi, the union government went and said, it is wrong to presume that we have made no effort. In fact, we have personally wrote 78,700 emails personally to every industries and every proponent
across the country who are registered with us seeking the public comment. Not even one email was sent to any panchayat, any municipality, any NGO, any environmentalist, nothing. Please understand what the implication will be. If you come with an anti-terrorism law, will we seek comments from every existing terrorist about what they feel about the particular law? So I'll not go too much further into it, but I would say that what it represents, this law represents, is a complete bureaucratic takeover of legislative function. And that is the problematic part. The second is, it is a complete industry dictated law which at the end will not benefit the industry. I think that is what we have to understand, that no industry can actually operate in a hostile climate where people are opposed to it. The single largest foreign direct investment in the history of India, POSCO in Orissa or Vedanta, and we see what has happened with Tuticorin. All of them are in problem because of the public. The environment is anyway gone. It is not that we need the environment. The fact is we need it for our own sustenance. The environment will take care of itself. And therefore, I think we must understand that this law needs to be rejected on the very foundation of our constitutional democracy itself. If such a law is passed, it will set a wrong precedent, not only for environment, but rule of law in India in general. Thank you.